Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Focus on Health. I'm your host, Peggy Mello. Today's guests are Marie Warda and Kristine Lindahl from MVP Healthcare. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Hi,
Thank you, Peggy.
Marie, can you start by just talking about what you do for MVP Healthcare?
Sure. I've been with MVP Healthcare for a few years, and what I'm responsible for is health education for the community and for our members. We provide various types of health education information resources to help our members take on life and live well. In addition, I'm also a registered nurse and have been so for many, many years, and I'm a certified case manager. So all of those things help me to identify issues that our members in the general community would like to know more about. And so MVP Healthcare tries to provide that service in the area.
Okay. Kristine?
Well, I am a community health educator also at MVP Healthcare, so I do many of the same things that Marie does. However, I come in a different door. I'm not a registered nurse, but I am a certified fitness professional and movement analyst, and actually was a professional dancer many years ago. So I've kind of combined all of those things and brought them to this table. So, you know, it's a lot of fun. I do many programs in the capital region that are health and wellness related.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start out with some facts about sleep. Number one, 85 million people in the United States have problems sleeping.
True.
Number two, 100 billion, that's with a B, $billion annually is lost to sleep disorders, or due to sleep disorders. Number three, before Thomas Edison's light bulb was invented, we slept 10 hours a night. Wouldn't that be nice?
Oh,
Sounds heavenly. Boy, so it is an issue, definitely.
Sure.
Marie, why is sleep important?
Well, sleep is the time where the body restores itself. We all know how good it feels when we get up in the morning after a good night's sleep, but unfortunately not all of us actually get a good night's sleep. There are opportunities when we sleep for our brain to heal itself, and there's some pathways within our brains that help do some restorative things, and that's when we have that time for our body to relax and sort of do some of that healing. Also, you need proper sleep for brain development, so it's very important for young children to get an appropriate amount of sleep, and infants sleep for a very long period of time. And people also learn better when they've gotten some sleep, so that's very, very important. During sleep, there's also some growth hormones that are released. One is called leptin, and leptin increases as you sleep, and leptin is thought to be an appetite suppressant. I need to sleep more. Ghrelin is another hormone that actually is thought to decrease the appetite. And, which is an appetite stimulant. So again, we want that to go down. But lack of sleep is one of the new thoughts that why we have so much obesity, because people do not have that restorative time so that these hormones go back into balance. During the time when you sleep also, your heart rate typically slows down by about 10%, as does your blood pressure, which lowers by about 10%. Again, that allows your body, again, to relax, to do some healing and not have to work so hard. And if you don't sleep very much, you tend to have a few more cardiac problems or heart problems. One thing that you can think about is the firemen who may be sleeping at the firehouse, and when that whistle goes off, they have to jump up possibly from a deep sleep and be 100% active. There have been some studies done that have indicated that people like firemen or perhaps ambulance drivers may have a higher incidence of cardiac problems as a result of not having complete sleep through the night. So again, things that we have to think about. And lastly, sleep feels good. again, what we talked about just a few minutes ago is, when you have 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night, boy, you get up in the morning and you feel like you're raring to go. So it's very, very important.
Okay. Kristine, can you address what the consequences are of sleep deprivation?
Well, I certainly can, Peggy, and it's astonishing how, there's just so many things that can go wrong if we don't get a good night's sleep. So first of all, there's an increased risk for certain adverse physical conditions, heart and circulation problems, increased risk for immune and digestive system difficulties. Marie already brought up there's an increased risk for obesity, things like anxiety and depression, musculoskeletal pain can often increase when one is not well rested. There's also, it can lead to reduced productivity and creativity as we go through a day. It can increase the risk of having a serious accident because we're not alert and we're not paying attention. Also, they have found that with sleep deprivation, one is often less likely to get a positive effect from a vaccine. So that's a relatively new finding. What else? There's impairment to memory. I think Marie already mentioned that. Increased irritability.
Yeah, I think
we're
mood
cranky
is not good when I haven't slept
We're
enough.
cranky when we don't get enough sleep. And so then you're not very much fun to be around.
Yeah, but I'm
Right?
imagining, if you can't cope, right?
Right.
You're irritable, you probably aren't practicing good judgment skills at the time.
And that's
and
my
when
next
you're in a
one.
job and you work and you have to deal with the public on a regular basis, that can definitely complicate your life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have lots of consequences in many
Lots.
different ways, right?
Lots and serious.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Marie, how much sleep is enough?
Well, the average adult needs at least 6 hours of sleep, or 7 to 8 hours sleep, but the average adult only gets about 6 hours of sleep. Again, this has to do with the restorative nature of sleep. Now, infants, they're the lucky ones. They get to sleep 16 to 18 hours a day. I'm not
I
sure
want to
that
be an
they're-
infant.
I know. I'm not sure that their moms sleep that much, but on average, newborns sleep 16 to 18 hours a day, and that's because of brain development. Again, it's that piece of all the neural pathways in the brain that get help to grow and to have some good brain development for infants. School-age children need at least 9 hours of sleep. Now, what's really interesting, if you talk to any mom of a teenager, you will often find that they burn the midnight oil. They don't want to have that kind of sleep. And college students, they don't even go out of the house until 11 o'clock at night. So if they have to get up for a 7 o'clock or an 8 o'clock class, you know darn well that they're not getting the proper sleep. So therefore, their learning can be impaired. And very often at schools, teachers will very often say that children can't concentrate, and they really do wonder about how much time they are getting of sleep at night. There's something called sleep debt, and in essence what that means is today I sleep 6 hours, tomorrow I only sleep 4, the next day I sleep 6 again. When I really need over those days 8 hours of sleep, and if you add all those numbers up, I'm in a sleep debt or a negative number. And so we very often will say, well, let's just sleep on the weekend. Well, and that makes sense. There's a little bit of that you can catch up, or you can basically pay back to your sleep debt bank a few of those hours, but it doesn't completely erase it. It's very, very important that you do try to get regular sleep every day, even on the weekends, and sleep for about the same amount of time. And sleep significantly can affect what goes on in the world. So it's very, very important to maintain your sleep. And, I know we talked a little bit about, consequences, but there's some real significant consequences that you may not have thought about that have happened in history. And I'd love to just tell you about a couple of them because it sort of is
I want to hear about them.
All right. Well, many of you will probably remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska.
Yeah.
And the final investigation, they thought at first that the individual had possibly been taking drugs, that kind of thing. But what they actually found out was that the captain turned over the helm of the ship to the first mate. What the captain did not realize is that the first mate had only slept about, I think it was 6 hours in the previous 48. So therefore, his judgment was very poor. Now, obviously, the captain got some sleep, but the first mate who was actually had control of the ship did not. And of course, this accident occurred, and which affected not just that first mate, but also affected the ecology of the area in Alaska. Another thing that comes to mind, again, it's in distant past, was 3 Mile Island.
Right.
And if any of you remember, there was a nuclear accident. It was luckily not a meltdown, but it occurred between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m. That's the particular time when most accidents occur at the work site. Typically, that's because that's not our normal biological clock time to be awake. It's normally our time to sleep. So as a result, most accidents do occur during that time. And what they found is that they felt that the individuals that were part of the nuclear accident were that they were just not as sharp and didn't recognize the signs quickly enough to be able to eliminate this accident from occurring. And lastly, the one that seems pretty impactful for people who are a little bit younger was the Space Shuttle Challenger, that accident. And most of us think that it had something to do with the space shuttle itself. But in 1986, that liftoff was actually authorized by a number of managers who had been working for days and days without sleep. And the reason why I say that is what they found is these managers were trying to address some minor technical and mechanical issues with the space shuttle. So by the time that it was finally, they thought all those issues were addressed, they had to make a decision, lift off or no lift off. And in what they believe happened is their judgment just wasn't that clear, and so they authorized a liftoff, and they had not checked everything, and then 83 seconds after the liftoff, the Challenger exploded. So again, these are very significant issues, but we can all talk about a very simple effect of sleep, sleep deprivation, and that's the drowsy driver. We often hear about worrying about the drunk driver, but the drowsy driver is just as impactful. If someone drifts off the side of the road, strikes another car, any number of things can be extremely impactful to people.
And it happens at any time of the day, too.
Absolutely. As a result of some of these studies that were done, the medical community also recognized that judgment can be significantly impaired with lack of sleep. So they started to make some regulations surrounding the amount of time that a medical resident can actually be taking care of patients before they have to take time for sleep. It's about judgment calls. In addition, they've also done that for truck drivers. Truck drivers are required to sleep a certain amount of time, balanced against the amount of time that they're driving on the road. Similarly for airline pilots. So there's a number of things that many industries have recognized are affected by sleep deprivation. The only people that don't seem to recognize it is ourselves. We always think that we can burn the midnight oil, stay up late to watch the movie, and still get up and be 100% in the morning. That's not always the case. If you do it occasionally, it's all right, but if you do it over time, you get into a sleep debt mode.
Yeah, I've found that I think a priority in my life is getting enough sleep. So there are times that if I'm up until 2 or 3 in the morning, I just wake up in the morning and call and say, I can't really come in at the time that I'm supposed to be coming in, but I'll be coming in a few hours later. And I make that a priority. And I'm much more refreshed, I think, as a result of that.
Well, you're a smart woman.
Smart.
Yeah. Okay, Kristine, can you talk about sleep cycles and define what REM sleep is?
I would love to. I really, I enjoy talking about the stages of sleep and how it creates a cycle, because a lot of people don't understand this. So there are 5 stages. The first stage is really the transition from wakefulness to sleep. It's very light sleep. It's really that, you see someone kind of just starting to nod off, and then they wake themselves up because their head moves. That it's shallow, very easily awakened, that's stage 1. Then we move into stage 2, which is still essentially light sleep, but the heart rate slows even more. The brain starts doing less complicated tasks. but we're also easily awakened in stage 2 sleep. Stage 3 is considered the beginning of priority sleep. And this is where it's more difficult to wake us up. And this begins the restorative sleep. There are these regenerative processes that begin to occur with the connective tissue, in our muscles, in our immune system. So some really important regenerative processes start during stage 3. Then we move into stage 4. This is the deep, slow wave sleep. It's critical. This stage 4 is really critical for the production of important neurotransmitters. So this is really important for our optimum brain health. Is the very deep, slow wave stage 4 sleep. And then finally we go into REM, which stands for rapid eye movement. And this is dream sleep. You know, this is where we, I find it very interesting. Our eyes move. I don't know if either of you ever have watched someone in REM sleep, but it's quite fascinating to watch. Eyes moving like crazy, but the muscles in our extremities become paralyzed during REM sleep, because there is so much going on, and you know, we don't want to be flailing and hitting ourselves as we're having those amazing dreams.
Right.
What's interesting also about REM sleep is that it actually, our pulse, our blood pressure and our pulse increase during REM.
Okay.
And our breathing becomes a little bit more irregular. So, stages 1 through 5, so the 5 stages create a cycle that we typically, if we're going to get a good night's sleep, what comprises a good night's sleep are 4 to 5 of these cycles. So a cycle, going through all 5 stages, lasts approximately between 90 minutes and 120 minutes. And so for a really good, solid night's sleep, you want to have 4 or 5 of those in a night. You know, you go through to REM, and then often, and I find this to be true, you wake up and you shift maybe to the other side, but then you start again with stage 1 and work your way through to REM. So that's a beautiful, healthy night's sleep. 5 of those. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, when I think about sometimes if I do a red-eye flight, right? So I get on the plane at 11:30, and I try to relax and I try to sleep, but how many stages do I really go through before I get to my destination at 7 in the morning? I don't know. Do you think am I going through full cycles, or?
That's it's hard to answer. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you may actually go through all the stages, but only one time or 2 times.
And sometimes what happens in those kind of situations is that your sleep, even though you can sleep on a plane, very often is interrupted by the pilot coming on, or the flight attendant coming on, or the person next to you needing to get up to go to the bathroom. You may be sleeping, but you never get into that deep restorative sleep, which is that really that stage 4 type of sleep. The other thing that's interesting is, back in the pioneer days and previous, they didn't have alarm clocks like we have now.
Right.
What they had was the sun. And the sun and the moon is nothing more than a cycle. So again, the moon rises, the moon goes back down, the sun rises and the sun sets. And most people would sleep by the cycles of the moon and the sun.
Right.
So basically they would get up in the morning when the sun rose, because they didn't need anything to wake them up.
Right.
And then they went to bed when the sun set, first of all, because they didn't have electricity. They didn't have that Thomas Edison 10 hours of light. And they ended up, just going to sleep because the lights were out and it was time to go to bed. So they tended to get a lot more sleep in the far past.
So you're saying nobody worked a night shift, huh?
Well, they did, but it wasn't exactly the same. It wasn't the kind of industrialized society that we have now. Back then, it was farmers, and they rose when the animals needed tending to, but they tended to go to sleep earlier. They tended to be asleep, and then that really helped to really put them in that restorative sleep, because they also worked very, very hard throughout the day. So they needed that sleep. So it was just this process and this cycle that would happen.
I've actually heard that if somebody works nights, that they lose an average of 1 night's sleep per week.
Well, actually, since we're talking about there are different types of sleep, and there's different types of sleep disorders, and one of them that we will talk about is called circadian disorders. And since we're asking about that now, I'm just going to sort of touch on that. Night shift workers is a real challenge for employers because, again, we talked earlier about the fact that many accidents occur between the hours of midnight and 3 o'clock.
Right.
That typically is when the sun is down, when the moon is up, and when your normal body, your biological clock or your circadian rhythm within your internal clock in your body says, gee, the sun's down, it's time to sleep. And yet you're forcing your body to stay awake and alert. So as a result of that, accidents can occur. One of the things that very often I do recommend to employers is that if you're going to have someone work a night shift, you can do a couple of things. You can stay on the night shift all the time, almost resetting your biological clock to recognize that nights is the time of your normal wake
That's
time.
what I would want to do.
Typically that's the case, but most workers work rotating shifts. Some go from days to nights, some go from nights to days, some evenings to nights. There's all different combinations. The problem occurs when you do too many rotations too close together. It's important to perhaps try to group your days together, so work 2 nights in a row, and then have your day off if that's possible, to sort of get back into a normal rhythm. Beyond that, you just have to be mindful to get the kind of rest that you need. What happens on night workers, though, also is very often they choose nights because it works out best in their family. Perhaps the night worker cares for children or adult parents during the day, and they're still not getting their rest. There has to be a balance, and you have to find that time to be able to go home and take a rest. For those of us who are lucky enough now to work during the day, I work my 8-hour shift during the day. I go home, I have dinner with my friends and family. I may do some exercise. I may have some sort of downtime, and then I go to bed. But very often what happens is night workers tend to go home and go right to sleep. When they're very stimulated from the night's events, they can't necessarily get into those stages of sleep that they should. So that's what I refer to when I talk about circadian disorders or circadian rhythm issues.
So there's other disorders,
Yeah,
there's
there are.
other ways that somebody is not able to fall asleep.
Absolutely. One of them is called intrinsic, and intrinsic means coming from the inside. So those are things that you typically cannot control. It can be medical conditions like sleep apnea. I'm sure you hear about that on TV all the time. Sleep apnea, in essence, is when you're not able to get the blood or the oxygen flow when you're sleeping. There's usually a physical reason why you're ceasing to breathe during the night. It may only be for a few seconds, but you actually stop breathing. Therefore, the oxygen levels aren't as good in your brain. You just don't get into those deep sleeps. So the other thing is restless leg syndrome. This is a syndrome that doctors didn't even recognize for many years, and only recently have done a lot of studies about restless leg syndrome. And it is a chronic medical condition that can be treated with some various medications. And then general insomnia. For whatever reason, a person doesn't sleep. Now, there's lots of reasons why that can be the case. You can be too stimulated before your normal sleep time. You could be excited by something. You could be sad about something. There's many reasons why someone may have insomnia.
I would think medications and or caffeine.
Absolutely. Those are a couple of things that are sort of artificial insomnia producers.
Right.
There are some medications that, like some of the decongestants, that actually create stimulating effects when you take them. So there are certain ones that you don't want to take before bedtime.
Right.
Also medications such as, some of the other things for children, especially like Ritalin, those kind of medications can affect you. There's many different things. It's really important to talk to your pharmacist and your medical provider about how this medication may affect my sleep. Very, very important to do that. One of the other types of disorders is what's called an extrinsic disorder. And basically it's what comes from the outside, not internally. And those can be things like what we call poor sleep hygiene. And, it's not really about cleanliness, it's about not sleeping when you're supposed to. So we talked earlier about pulling all-nighters when you're in college.
Right.
You make a choice about doing that rather than planning out your time to do the studying. So instead of knowing that you need to get 6 or 7 to 8 hours of sleep for your test tomorrow,
Right.
you choose just to stay up all night to study, to get more time in, and yet you're still not going to be sharp in the morning. So it just creates a problem for sleep. Also, drugs and alcohol. There's many drugs that are stimulants, illegal drugs especially like cocaine and marijuana. You really need to recognize that if you use those kind of drugs that it will affect your whole sleep pattern. So those are some of the other disorders that do affect sleep.
So there's different ways you can define a sleep disorder. So either, like for instance, you can't fall asleep, or you can't sleep throughout the night. You're waking up constantly. What are the other different problems you can have? Waking up too early.
Yeah, there's lots of different different conditions that can cause that problem. Again, your doctor really needs to look at what it might be. People tend to get into a sleep that they don't go from one stage to the next.
Right.
For various reasons. For women, as they go through menopause, that tends to be an issue. Again, it has to do with the fluctuation in hormones. And also the issue of hot flashes for women that tend to happen sometimes at night. For men, there may be prostate issues that they need to go and use the bathroom in the middle of the night. Again, it disrupts their sleep. They don't get into the complete cycle and they have to sort of start over again.
Right.
So those kind of things can also occur. But your doctor really is, it's very important to have a conversation with your medical provider, whether that's your physician, nurse practitioner, to have the conversation to let them know what is affecting your sleep. Simple things such as stress can be really problematic. If you're ruminating about your job or what you have to do the next day, constantly thinking about that and not allowing your mind to take a break and take a rest. So there's lots of other reasons why you may not be getting a good night's sleep. And
So I'm just wondering how a doctor would diagnose a sleep disorder and how would they treat it?
Well, again, there is a number of different methods for doing it, but for a true sleep disorder like sleep apnea, typically a physician would send you to a sleep lab where basically you will be observed when you sleep and there'll be some monitors that will be done. And then the sleep professionals actually come back with the reasons why they think someone isn't sleeping. There's actually, again, they use some electrodes that are just placed on the skin that measure your brain waves, and they can actually determine whether or not there's a physical reason, such as a seizure, or whether you're just having sleep apnea. They'll be measuring your blood pressure and your respirations while you sleep. And if they notice that you're not breathing for 10 seconds, they're going to assume that you have in essence, sort of a blockage preventing you from having that good sleep. So those are some of the things that the doctor will do. Also, the doctor would look at your medicines to say, are some of these things, depending on the time you're taking them, may be affecting your sleep.
Right.
And again, there's some other things that can be done that that can be looked at, like sleep diaries, things like that too.
Now, I'm thinking about all the things in my lifetime that have kept me up at night, whether it's watching a TV show that was exciting, drinking coffee too late in the day, noises, animals, children, hotel rooms, hospitals, all of that. What can we do to sort of change our environment to make it conducive to sleep?
So what are some of the strategies out there that can help us with this? I think a good lead-in is I'm going to pick up exactly where Marie left off in terms of, how do you determine what's going on? And that is how they have found it to be very useful for people who are having sleep problems to keep a sleep diary, where you really are logging, when you go to sleep, what you've done, what you've eaten, when you've done it, when you've eaten it, when do you wake up?
Okay.
Those kinds of things. So, though, it's not really exactly a strategy, but if you are having problems, that might be a good place to start, because this logging helps you begin to see patterns.
Okay.
And those patterns can help you then begin to really understand maybe some of the triggers, some of the things that are in your habits, in some of your behavior that may be the triggers that keep you from getting a good night's sleep. So that's one thing. I think right off the bat, and this is interesting, people don't often think about this, how long have you had your mattress? How good is your mattress? How good are your pillows? There are people who are still sleeping on the same mattress that they've had for 20 years. And mattresses that were made 20 years ago weren't made to last 20 years,
Yeah.
So just something, you want to not skimp on a good mattress and good pillows, really comfortable pillows, those kinds of things. We've talked about limiting beverages in general, alcohol certainly, and caffeine. You don't want to have any of that stuff close to when you're going to bed. You want to create a conducive environment. And this is different, this is a very individualized thing.
It is.
But for some people, it really means having complete darkness. For some people, it means having that nightlight over there next to the door. But it's really understanding, what is the environment? What can I create that's going to make an environment that's most conducive for me to really get myself into that zone where I can drift off and get myself going through all those stages. Another piece of the environmental conditions that I think people often don't think about is the temperature and humidity. Now, for some people, having a cool, dark room with a humidifier going, that's perfect. Other people like the temperature a little bit higher. But it's that is part of the environmental conditions that you want to consider when creating an environment that's going to be very conducive for a good night's sleep. Smoking before bedtime is also a bad idea.
Smoking at all is
Smoking at all is a really bad idea.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, they really do talk about, if possible, avoiding taking naps during the day. That said, though, I think a lot of people do find that a cat nap in the middle of the afternoon is very regenerative. So yeah, I mean, if you find that to be true, but they really do recommend that if you like naps, if you're a napper, to not nap for longer than 20 minutes. That's really the recommendation there. I think another thing that we tend not to think about when we grow up is routine, a bedtime routine. We all had very specific routines for our kids. Right? This is what we do to get ready for bed. But we kind of then maybe don't think that that's important for us, when indeed it is. When is it time to turn off the TV? Maybe
should we have a TV?
Not a good idea to have a TV in the bedroom. They definitely recommend don't watch TV in the bedroom.
I have friends that
the
watch
bedroom
TV.
is for.
Let's see. My friend watches TV and then she falls asleep on the couch and then she stays there. She doesn't get up.
Part of the problem, too, is
It's nice to be in a bed.
It's definitely nice to be in a bed.
Part of the problem, too, is what we watch on TV. Because typically, if we have a TV in our bedroom, very often we're watching the 11 o'clock news before we nod off. And I've watched the news a little bit in the last few weeks, and it's not always good news.
No.
And, of course, what that does is it is anxiety-producing and stress-producing, so therefore it makes it more difficult for you to fall asleep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing I want to talk about is, what if you have an animal in the house? What should you be doing with the animals?
Well, I think that, certainly kind of a general recommendation is keep your animals out of the bedroom. That's out. Banish them from the bedroom. However, that said, again, I think that there are individuals who actually sleep better if Fido is curled up at the end of the bed. So in general, I think it's better if the pets are not in the bedroom.
Well, I have a coworker whose cat actually sleeps on her face,
and I know
she's sleeping.
I have a good friend.
I would not be able to sleep.
I know. I have a good friend who does the same thing. I can't imagine it, but in general, better to keep the pets out of the bedroom. TV out of the bedroom.
What if you have a young child and the child wants to sleep with you, or the child wants to come in at night?
Well, that is, again, something that probably you just, you need to deal with redirecting the behavior, that maybe gradually your goal is to not have that child coming in. So maybe each night you limit the time,
right.
Cut the time,
send them off,
get them into bed, and then also establish some boundaries and guidelines for morning. Mommy and daddy have to get their sleep. So if you wake up, don't come in right away. Play in your room for a while. Kind of establishing those guidelines.
That's going to help with sleep, I would say.
It is.
Absolutely.
All right. Any last comments either of you want to make?
No.
Actually, I'm going to throw out one more really good strategy.
Okay.
Exercise.
Oh, yes.
Exercise comes in really important here too.
Yeah.
Getting, release the endorphins, which is really helpful, and just that physical activity, engaging in physical activity every day does go a distance to helping us get a good night's sleep.
But Kristine, how close to sleep do you recommend exercise?
Good point, and very good question. Not that close. I mean, important to exercise every day, but you really want to do it. They recommend, don't exercise any closer to 2 hours, before bedtime. And then again, I think that's something to monitor a little bit for yourself personally. I know personally that I have to do it even earlier than that. That for me, I need to give myself about 4 hours between when I've been very active and when I go to bed.
Okay.
Because I've been, when you've been experimenting with it over time, you get to learn these things.
Okay.
About yourself.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Just to follow up, let's just mention a website, www.mvphealthcare.com. Okay.
That's right. And for people who are interested in knowing more about the programs that MVP Health Promotion Department offers, they can call me directly, Kristine Lindahl, at area code 518-388-2485.
Okay, and this is actually a shortened version of one of the presentations that MVP offers. You don't have to be a member of the health plan to attend, right?
Correct.
Okay. Can you just mention a few of the other presentations?
Yes, we have 10 healthy habits for a healthy lifestyle, safe stepping. We have a number of different nutritional presentations, the New American Plate, portion distortion, things like that. We also offer a very, very effective arthritis program, which is actually over several weeks. Understanding advanced directives is another one.
Yeah, that's a big
so those
one.
are some of the presentation topics that we offer. We also have quite a number of ongoing fitness programs in the capital region, and we also sponsor mall walking clubs at 3 area malls.
Great.
So if you give me a call, I can give you a lot more information about all of those.
Okay. Thanks very much for coming in.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Peggy.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time on Focus on Health.